Hello and welcome to the Ms. Wonderful Film Club podcast. Today I have a special guest. And am I saying your name correctly? Yannick?
Yeah,
Yannick
that's it.
Jamey, yes. Who is currently his film The Big Wait is on Short of the Week website, which is where I found it and was able to connect with him a little bit. And we're going to chat about some of his films, especially this one, The Big Wait, because it really resonates on different levels now, um, in 2024, in November of 2024, that I think is relevant to talk about. And maybe we can talk a little bit about how you made it and how you came up with the idea for it.
Yeah.
And one of the thoughts that I wanted to start with is this concept of silence and how this vibration of silence emanates in this film, this short film, The Big Wait. So, can you talk a little bit about um, how you found these people who are doing an emergency airport? You know, they're
Yeah.
managing this space, and there's such silence in their life, and how you were drawn to make a film about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's we kind of we stumbled on it. I mean, I kind of it all started with my fascination with the landscape there at the Nullarbor Plain in Australia, which is a very rare kind of landscape, funnily enough, on Earth. It's just this a place that's like tabula rasa, like completely flat landscape, 360 degrees around you for just miles and miles. No trees, no hills, nothing, no features, just absolute nothingness. It's just like a landscape of very, very low grass and bushes. And it's as flat as the ocean. And it's probably like the whole desert is probably the size of Nebraska, like the entire desert, you know? So it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you're basically going like it's like a treadmill of nothingness. And I just wanted to go out there. And yeah, I mean, like another thing which is pretty fascinating is there's not a huge amount of life. There is some, you know, there's birds and there's obviously insects and things, but at night, I mean, it's the closest thing you get to pure silence. It's like ringing in your ears. So, you know, we were out there for a while in that kind of space, and I knew about this place. We, you can get fuel there if you're driving in, but it is really remote. You know, you have to like drive with a four-wheel drive, and it's like about 4 or 5 hours from a main road, across really difficult like dirt roads. And when you get there, you can get some fuel, you know, and there's a train line. So there's train, there's car, and there's occasional planes that would land. But they have fuel there, and they have facilities. They have comfort. They have a lot of comfort. So, but when we got there and we met these people, they were just absolutely charismatic and amazing. And we were just like, oh my God, this is the film, you know, because I wanted to meet some people that lived in that landscape to try and understand what is it like how does it make you feel? Because there was something so metaphorical and beautiful about that kind of thing. Like when you're constantly faced with this background of pure void, you know, and then to have them be there at that time was just pure serendipity. It was amazing. And they were up for being filmed on the spot. And we kind of just filmed it in a week, you know, we got to know them by filming them. Um, so it was quite spontaneous and beautiful in that way. We didn't have many preconceived ideas, but as it was going, it was like, oh, okay, this is the things that is coming out of Greg and Kate, you know, so the things coming out of Greg and Kate's mouth were just like pure gold. It's amazing when you come across people like that as documentary filmmakers. It's all about the people. And so he spoke a lot about meditating. He spoke a lot about just not having any thoughts and getting rid of all the noise and all the non-essential things. And the landscape is pretty obviously there in front of you, and it completely reflects what he's saying, you know. So it's kind of like an inner landscape, literally. It's this metaphorical thing, like this emptiness we have inside of all of us, or this
Mhm.
sort of um, it can be a good emptiness or a bad one, it's up to you, but there's a metaphor there, and so like it was a no-brainer to just be able to have moments of just staring at that landscape, not having many cuts and much noise in the actual film, itself,
Yeah. I almost thought of them when I was watching them like in a Buddhist monk kind of village or something
Mm.
because they have their tasks to do and they do them with joy, it seems, right? And then there's a lot of silence and contemplation, and then they get back to their tasks. Um,
Yeah.
did they, in experiencing that kind of silence and quiet, did they seem joyful to you? I mean, they seem joyful on the screen, but I'm wondering, did they seem like they had an inner knowing or a joy that is different from people who are in the hustle and bustle of the contemporary world?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's really that simple. Like I think that there's this kind of conception about Australia, about places like that are always like, there's always some kind of darkness lurking behind the corner, or there's are they really happy? Is they really like, aren't they going to be at each other's throats or anything like that? And like the answer is just like, no, it's actually great. Like everything's fine. uh it's like they're of course I mean, basically like the darkness is minimal. It's more minimal than being in a city, and you can feel it when you're there. Like when I was there physically, it's just there's something really magical about the place. It's so bizarre. It's like, how does this place exist? um it's just the most absurd, bizarrest place ever. And it's not a set. It could be a set. Like this could be a fiction film. We could have built this out there, but it's not. It's there, so it makes it kind of extra special. And there's something physically there in the place that feels kind of magical and makes you feel good for some
Yeah.
reason. I mean, some people might feel a little bit scared as well. But for me, and definitely for Greg and for Kate, that's what it was like. So it's interesting. It's kind of an open interpretation thing. Like some people could go there and feel very differently than others, but it's definitely a place that tells you a lot about yourself when you're there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. They'll because I guess they have to be really comfortable with themselves. She said that. It's
Mm.
Kate, right? Not K, Kate with a T.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
says something about that they were always mad. They were always mad
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
crazy people, right? So this isn't that odd for them to be there.
That's like that's my main question is like, is it that landscape that makes you go mad, or do you have to be mad in the first place to live in a place like that, live in that landscape? Like it's a kind of chicken and egg question, and it's like hard to really answer that. But they have a really, really interesting way of dealing with um madness and sanity. I found that was the most interesting thing for me. And I mean, if it was a longer film, you could really go much more deeply into this. I think I just scratched the surface. But the idea of doing these tasks is really I mean, the kind of Sisyphean tasks all the more because they're so absurd, because no one actually comes. No
Yeah.
one, we're doing our dishes and our stuff for guests every day or whatever, right? And for basic maintenance. But here it's like no one's actually coming. There's no point, and so it's very Sisyphean. But it takes on a different meaning here. It's the meaning of doing it is to keep a kind of mold of society, to keep a certain structure, because you see them also really breaking all those molds and doing whatever they want, and like just being extremely free to do whatever they want, like driving their bikes on the runway or pretending to be an airplane and just doing just going out in the streets if they want. Like we wanted to film this, but we couldn't. But anyway, she does mention sort of singing as loud as she wants and saying whatever she wants in the street,
Hmm.
But yeah, so the balance between that freedom and between having a certain structure, they're very aware that you need to almost self-impose a structure. Otherwise, when you don't have that and you don't have any kind of mold, you will go crazy. You will absolutely go mad. So it's just a really interesting self-awareness and balance about it's good to be mad a little bit and be free, and then to know where the limits are. So be grounded with a self-imposed routine and structure as well. So that's the metaphor that's super interesting for me, I think.
Yeah. It's interesting because I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the concept of freedom, because I think
Mhm.
I looked at your other films as well, and there's a lot of this vast kind of spaciousness, and I wanted to find out. But I do want to mention, so I study yoga and yoga philosophy, and one prominent yogi today, and a lot of the books from old time yogis will talk about having a mad heart. Mad in the sense not angry, but crazy, right?
Mhm.
That in order to really live a full life, there needs to be something in your heart that keeps you going, that keeps you alive, which they do seem like people in your film. They seem like people who are happy and joyful. And a lot of people, especially in the US right now, and after an election, there's all kinds of fears and questions. And the term freedom has always been a big, idea in the United States. I don't know that people really fully understand what that means in one's own life versus, in contrast to war. There's all
Mhm.
kinds of connections we can make with that word. But there's definitely a lot of people who don't know how to be happy, who don't know how to be joyful, um,
Mm.
and don't necessarily do a lot of the inner searching. And I think this film, so The Big Weight, as well as well, what's the Crusoe of Tin City?
Mhm.
Yeah. There's
Oh,
a
thanks for
lot of
watching
this,
that.
yeah, this big, spacious openness. And I'm curious what your individual idea is of freedom. What is freedom to you?
Oh, I think it's just being uninhibited. Like it feels so good when you're uninhibited and you just um when you have certain when you have an impulse or something to want to be a little bit mad, or you know, it could be anything, right? It could be dressing a certain way, it could be singing in front of people, it could be um uh saying some things, doing what I mean, and I think that that's important. Like a lot of people on both sides of politics today, for instance, feel like their freedoms impeded in different ways, and it's valid. I think anyone who feels like their sense of freedom is impeded has should be allowed to you know, mention it and say something about it. And it's like a constant discussion, because when I'm uninhibited, for instance, if that means breaking a certain social norm, then that is going to affect someone else's freedoms and social norms. So it's always a constant dynamic and a constant battle. But I think there are certain things that we can all kind of resonate with, like that's the reason why I kind of make films, I guess, is like if a lot of people are resonating with watching someone be uninhibited on a screen, it's probably because they secretly wish to do the same thing.
Mhm.
So like
Yeah.
there's certain things we can definitely all agree on is freedom, So
Yeah.
I don't know, that's what it is for me, but it obviously is always an open kind of conversation. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of secret subversive things we could all agree. Oh, we wish we could do that. And so
Yeah.
that's when I'm like, yeah, well, that's if you actually do it, it feels good. Why don't you do it? Just do what you want. Just say what you want.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
say F you to this or that, and just
Right.
like go ahead and break rules and people judge you. It feels good to do things and then not care about the judgment. That's sort of
Yeah.
it.
Do you think that, and we talked before we started recording, we had a brief chat. Do you think that for some people, commerce and capitalism and making money is why they feel more inhibited? I mean, are the
Mm.
social norms about prestige and status, or are they sometimes about how can I, continue to make money or keep my job? Because one of the things that It's Greg, right? Greg and Kate. And
Mm,
you're, yeah, he says there's no worry about getting a raise, right? Or getting a
yeah.
promotion. And, he's just kind of holding this space in case somebody shows up to the airport.
Mm,
But there's not the striving and the competition. They have, what they need to
yeah.
live. So I wonder, because when I, as a creative person myself, I feel
Yeah.
like I wrestled with these questions of if I really say what I want to say, which I tried for a while, just so you know. I
Mm,
did really,
yeah.
really have some experiments. Um, there are consequences, right? In
Yeah.
the world of what's professionalism or what's appropriate, according to a government or according to a job or something. So tell me what you think about that, because I do think that some of the people that you've spotlighted in your films, they don't seem to
Hmm.
be concerned with the status elements of a regular
Yeah,
society.
I mean, it's always a trade-off between what's like the worst of two evils or whatever. I mean, say you do lose your job because you said something. Are you going to be happier jobless and having expressed yourself in an unconstrained way versus staying, like a sardine in a tin can in the same old routine and same old job for the rest of your life? Like,
Mhm.
where are you better off, And I mean, it's always that thing. It's always that dynamic and trade-off. But for sure, there's this huge extremity between like how money affects people. I mean, like, you on the one hand, people who aren't making enough money are unhappy because they have to budget everything and it's just annoying. And all they want is to be able to afford stuff and not have to budget. And they hate the word budget. And then on the other hand, you have people that make so much money that they have such a huge target on their backs. All the relationships are corrupt. They have no idea who really likes them or who wants them for their money. And that's complete loneliness and unhappiness there as well. And then
Mhm.
there's this huge space. And so like, but then the thing is like, there's not this clarity about finding a space in the middle that's comfortable. And there's no language about that being something to strive for. So I think we're figuring that out
Yeah,
at the moment.
definitely. I agree with you. I want
Yeah.
to ask one more thing about
Mm.
your films, and then I want to ask a little bit about you and kind of what motivates you in creating something new. But I really loved Made of Light as well. I looked at that film that's on your
Wow,
website.
thank you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because I love trees and that what was fascinating, I mean,
Yeah.
fascinating. So for listeners, I the man's name is OKE. I'm not sure how you say his name. Is it
OLE, Ole. Yeah.
OLE? Okay.
Yeah.
Say it
Yeah,
again. Say his name.
It's a Faroese name. It's a Ole, like
Okay.
like Ollie, but with an E. Ole.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And he sculpts trees into lampshades, and as
Mm.
he's sculpting the lampshade and the tree, it has a life, and he's really communing with the life of that tree. And he talks about, I wrote it down, the sun and the way the sun comes out of the tree, like the
Hmm.
feeling like the rays of the sun have been buried, and as he's sculpting it, it's coming out. And some of the formations on the tree and the images. And so how did you find him? Because there's such a quiet sweetness about him and what he's doing, and he seems like he's living in some Eden,
Yeah,
some
yeah.
paradise. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a bit of a serendipity as well, like in terms of well, I was just in again, it's like most of my films is that it starts off with a landscape or with the background of the film, and then the foreground gradually kind of comes in. But it starts off with me traveling to a place. So I went to the Faroe Islands because I just saw images of it, and I just thought, wow, this is amazing. I think there must be some interesting people living there. And when I was there, I'd met some other filmmakers who'd made a film about him actually, and they would just I just bumped into them on the ferry, and I was trying to film some people, and it didn't really work out, so it was a bit of a struggle for a couple of weeks. And they told me about him, pretty much a day or two before I was leaving the Faroe Islands. And then I just called him, showed up. He was happy for me to start filming from the moment that I met him. So literally when he says, "Would you like to see my Hobbit hole?" I mean, that's the first time that he's telling me anything. He's just like, "Hello," you know? So he was, and the film was kind of shot like in a day and a half. So it was like really spontaneous. Everything you see is that the reason it probably feels like that is he's such the most wide open heart, and like, and you kind of, I think that you can always sense a sense of spontaneity come through, and it's with the camera's a little bit handheld all the time, and so it's just really a point of view kind of documentary, and about more a bit about a relationship between the two of us.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and it's interesting. He does talk about the language of trees as silence as well, like,
Yes.
so he brings that up as well.
Yeah. Well, there's one scene where you're in a room of his and there's a yellow wall and he talks and then he's done talking and he's kind of looking at the camera
Hmm.
and I can feel there's like he's the questioning of him. It was like, okay, when are you going to turn off the camera? When are we going? Like, because he's kind of looking at you, looking at the camera, but and I loved the pause and not totally shifting from that scene because it gives the viewer such a chance to look in his eyes, which I think is just one of the things people in general need to do so much more with others is look
Yeah.
in someone's eyes because their soul is not hiding anywhere when you can look in their eyes, right? And you can see someone through their eyes and things are communicated that are not with words. And so through that, you really can see the kindness and gentleness of this person. And there's not many head-on shots like that of a slight
Hmm.
discomfort, questioning, and calm all at the same time. And I really liked that part um,
Thank
of the
you.
film. Yeah, yeah. Um, I wanted to just mention, so with trees, do you have a relationship with nature and trees because like on your own, not when you're shooting films?
Hmm.
I have a relationship with trees that makes people wonder sometimes about me because I live near this big park in Philadelphia called the Wissahickon, and it has a lot of really interesting history. Back in the 1600s, they thought it was the end of the world, and this small group, and I've his name, I think it's Kappas something. I can't remember his name, but off the top of my head. But he was a hermit, and he had this group of women who thought he was a leader of some kind, um, for the end of the world, and they decided to live in the forest basically, and they
Hmm.
thought the end was near, and it's almost like the end is always near, which is what another element that I like of the films that you're shooting is that there's this feeling of the end of the world in them because I think people have always
Yeah.
for so many centuries felt it's the end of the world, right? Because change is a constant.
Yeah.
Um, but trees, yeah, there's something about, in my own experience, touching trees. And I walk through the forest and I just will touch them and I'll video them. And my children find me strange because I like trees. I feel a real connection to them.
Hmm.
Um, and I do think what he says is accurate. Do you have experience with nature, with trees?
Well,
Um,
it's funny because not absolutely not until I made the film. I had n no intention of making a film about trees, and I didn't ever think about it much, which is why that it comes back to the thing of the spontaneity of just like just the just making a film that I never thought I would make, uh, is what made me learn something, maybe have a different insight about something.
mhm, mhm,
I mean, I was always interested, I guess, in the idea of like this is trees having a soul, or like the question of, when a tree falls in a forest, like do you hear it and all that stuff. But he had a very specific philosophy, and about it's such a poetic point of view about as soon as you put a light, when you illuminate the interior of a tree and put a light inside a tree, you can read it like a book. You
mm,
can start reading all these stories about it, and I'd never seen anyone really do that. And then the irony of him living in a country with no native trees, like him having this kind of insight. It's like only in that kind of place can you have the insight. You know, if you lived with trees all the time, you're taken for granted. But when they're all gone, when you're in an environment where there's no trees, that's when you can really see them for what they are. You know, you can have this certain distance from it and see something else. And then the real big question that I found most interesting is just the when he sees this particular pattern on one of the lampshades of a bird. And you know, you can, it's, some people might find it hard to see it. I mean, you have to, but that's why I just, you know, people can watch the film as much as they want until they kind of see the image. But when you see it, it's pretty fascinating. You know, you see such a beautiful kind of profile shape of a bird in flight. And then to me, I'm like, come on, the coincidence of that is so big.
Right, right.
Like trees are, you know, the birds are on them all the time. Like, is it possible that like they're actually conscious of it and can somehow like create a kind of shape inside themselves of that? Like, that sounds crazy to me, but at the same time, like the coincidence is so big that it's almost just, the question is so beautiful. You know, can trees actually dream of birds, and could they even dream of the idea of flying? Because it's the one, they're just rooted, like that's their nature. They're rooted to the ground and they can't do
Hmm.
anything. So maybe they want to do the opposite of that and just want to fly away. That, those are the questions that really made me interested in trees all of a sudden, you know, like, and open my mind up a little bit more to the potential of that. And then you have all these scientists discovering things about the wood wide web, and being interconnected with their roots and with fungi and all that stuff. And so there's no, we don't know, you know, we just don't know. Like, it's so mysterious, and he had a little extra insight to add into that mystery.
Yeah,
Um, so the question to me is more, I like the question more than anything else. I don't
yeah,
really have a specific
yeah,
uh conclusion or anything, you know.
yeah. I guess that's the uninhibited piece. I mean, that's one thing. When I walk, I will take off my shoes. I'll put my feet on the roots of the tree. I love to look at the roots.
Mm,
I touch the tree. I really do feel like certain ones stand out. They do feel to me like they have a soul,
mm,
and we take them for granted. So I really appreciated the care and attention and love
mm.
that he brought to hit those sculptures. And I think it's inspiring, you know, and I think we have these big blanket terms like environmentalism and climate change, and everything can become jargon until your heart is invested, I think, right? And when you're,
Yeah,
you know, through experience, and I think as a filmmaker, you see that you have to feel your way a lot of times. And when you can feel the experience, it's much different than reading an article about an experience. And I think the job of a
yeah,
filmmaker is to make the viewer feel and to have such a feeling that inspires them to live more in tune, you know, to
yeah,
live
for sure.
more awake.
Well, and he's interesting because I mean, I think it's hard to connect with trees from the outside for certain people because it's, you know, it's just sort of bark really, and this kind of, the exterior perspective is a bit, it requires quite a bit of imagination. But he is doing something very similar to photography and filmmaking in a way. I mean, he's a sculptor, but he's working with light. So
Mhm.
he's, the new perspective is trying to make you see the tree from the inside and not
Yeah.
the outside.
Yeah.
And by using, I mean, every lamp is almost a photograph because he's adding light, and photography is, you know, the like working with light with photo, and the trees of photosynthesis and all that stuff. And like, it's the same root word. And he's adding a light and a, like, because he's doing a paper thin lampshade, he's taking a very specific moment in time of the tree, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and adding light to just that moment. If he made the lamp slightly smaller, it would be a different moment of the tree and a different shape and all that stuff. So every single lamp is literally a photograph of a certain point in time of the life of that tree. So it's kind of like photography, really. It's like sculpture and photography blending together.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really appropriate for sort of cinema and how cinema can illuminate a viewer about, about trees in that way. I mean, it's quite important to physically go out and feel it, and go out and feel things, go out in a wood or in a forest and feel the tree. But I think this perspective from this particular character worked really well with the medium of cinema,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to open people's minds about, to give them a different perspective about the world of trees.
Well, the other interesting thing when you say light, photographers and filmmakers are always working with light, and people who, in spiritual frameworks are talk about light and dark, right? Light with a capital L. So there, it makes
Yeah.
sense that there would be an overlap, that there would be a kind of that there can be a kind of spirituality of light. What does the light reveal, through film?
Mm,
Which is, I think, why I'm drawn to it, because I really, spirituality. I think there's so many wars and conflicts that are ongoing regarding right and
mm,
wrong and beliefs and this and that, but light is just a constant of you need darkness to reveal light, or to see the light, or to
mm,
appreciate it, right? And so many stories, and I think the thing that artists are drawn to is, how do I seek light, in the darkness? And I think that's why a lot of people make art and make film. I'm curious your
mm.
motivation in filmmaking, and how long you've been doing it.
Well, I've always wanted to do it since I was like 14 or so, and it took a while to kind of I've always wanted to do fiction, and then I kind of stumbled on documentary because I really love traveling. So I've never thought I would do documentaries, but then just by traveling and wanting to make films, bringing a camera with me, I kind of stumbled on things, and then realized, oh, you can also make a documentary as well and make an equally interesting film. But I'm working on a lot of fiction things as well. But I guess the thing that I gravitate to a lot is trying to find images that are unique and that don't exist, really metaphorical kind of images. So a lot of the documentaries have my documentaries so far have a specific image that I think you could say is metaphorical or something, and that sort of kind of represents the it kind of culminates into a certain image each film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, you can pick whichever image you want, but I mean, for me, there's always a certain image that kind of culminates. I mean, in the big way, it's mostly this image of a lawnmower in a desert, and
Yeah.
and made of light is like, the bird, this bird inside a tree. And then Crusoe of Tin City's more this kind of final image of these seagulls eating this man, the old man, and the dog being the last the last one left in this weird landscape or whatever. I mean, I don't know, that one was a much more sort of experimental film, but I think that those images kind of come up, and then I'm like, oh, that's the film, and
Yeah.
you just strive to try and capture those. I think that's always with me more or less in any film that I make. Um and then it's kind of like a dream, like each film has a certain dream or a certain vision, and you just, if you can capture it, and then people recognize it, then like that is what always feels really good, and that's why I want to keep doing it. It's
Mhm.
kind of just that simple. Then I'm always fascinated by how people interpret it or things like that, but I don't know if I always have a never really starts off with like an intention or a theory or anything from the outside. You know what I mean?
I can feel that, and I think that's why I like them, because as a viewer, so I'm not a filmmaker myself. I've dabbled in, some photography, or I've taken some shots here and there, and I think I told you I'm a
Mm,
writer. So I am thinking more cinematically in recent years. But the thing that I've watched in looking at films, a lot of feature films and then short films are like my little, candy for fun, like they're a little on the
Hmm.
side,
Right.
um, is that the filmmaker, I think, and the director has to be sort of invisible rather than having an agenda. And I think that you can feel the difference of, like, there are some films I don't feel like I have to finish something if I start it, because if I start something and I don't like it or I don't feel it vibing with, to use like almost a California kind of term, I don't vibe
Hmm.
with it, I will just turn it off. Same thing as a restaurant. It's like, I don't like this, I'm out of here, right? So,
Yeah.
um, but I think that there needs to be that vibration of openness, which is, I think, the images capture that, what you do, but there's not you can feel that there's not an agenda, or like this is what it has to be, and the filmmaker as the artist becomes an open space, right, to let somebody else or an image or a story take hold. And I think that's actually a really healthy approach to filmmaking, that's a little, different than a lot of the in American cinema, with a lot of the kind of very dogged, dogmatic, or intentional
Mm.
masculine film directors. So
Yeah.
some of those films are great, but they're also not relevant anymore for what we're experiencing as a culture, which is a shift, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And that shift is still is constantly evolving as well with like a pendulum on both sides, I think as well. So it's definitely, I think everyone can agree that we prefer things that don't have an agenda. It's just the right or the left are the same, I think. Like it's
Yeah.
just like it's just this kind of we can see through it, you can see through it, you can see when you're trying to be manipulated or you're trying to be
Yeah.
whatever, and you can, that's just a general tendency, I think, with all of us, in all the art forms, or all, all professions or whatever, like, so
But do you really think people can see when they're being manipulated? I think that is actually the challenge we're facing, is
definitely it's
discernment.
challenging.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a lot of discernment that's missing. And when we spend so much time scrolling or, information, sometimes I think the discernment piece can be missing for people.
Oh, totally. I mean, the worst is it gets to so many meta levels. I mean, literally people who say, um, use the same terms and basically just say, we're being manipulated because of this, are themselves. That is a brainwashing in itself, and there's layers of manipulation that we can all be blind to. And I mean, but there's an awareness and a desire to, and an aversion to it, I think, nowadays. And at the end of the day, to me, that doesn't even matter. Like none of that stuff matters. Knowing what's real, knowing what's being manipulated or not. I mean, the image of the lawnmower at the end of the film, I manipulated that. That's not a real lawn. Like, it's not. It's been crafted
Mhm.
intentionally. In a sense, there is an agenda, but I'm hoping that the power of the image, or whatever it is in that, can transcend all of that. Like, that's what I kind of like, is just going, oh, that's the idea, is just, hitting you for something, and you can sense that the idea is quite open. It's a metaphor where you can have space for you to interpret whatever you want in it. Um, whenever you achieve that, then I think that's it's very transcendental. Like it transcends. It doesn't make you care about whether or not it was manipulated, whether or not something's documentary or fiction or this or that. And when you get there, I think that's great, And I mean, it resonates a lot, that's what I would sort of strive for, to try and find our way back to, I don't know, purity of images, or I don't know what you
Mhm.
want to call it, but something
Yeah.
that just feels like it's open-ended, and you have space for yourself in it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to say it, is that I think a lot of us are seeking that purity and space for ourselves, and to be
Mm.
heard. And I think if filmmaking allows for that space where you can find yourself in it, then it's doing a good job, and
Yeah.
you feel as a viewer, just like with a person, I'm heard here. Whether this filmmaker sees me or not,
Mhm.
I'm here. We there's a we as
Yeah.
opposed to a separation.
For sure. And I mean, what an art form that does that the best is music, really. So I think
Yeah.
that, like, I
Yeah.
think that I really try and find the music in filmmaking as much as I can. Like, it's a lot of people have made comparisons between film and music, and I totally agree with that. You know, Kubrick was one of the first to say it, and it's totally true. You want everything in film to feel like you want to follow a feeling, and you want to follow, and that's it. That's what music is a kind of feeling more than anything. That's the most pure, most intuitive agenda that
Yeah.
you can have.
Yeah.
And I think that's good enough, and that's or not good enough, but that's what I would want to strive for. Um, to listen to the music of your film and not care about pre-existing structures too much, or any of that,
I love,
and
yeah.
yeah.
Well, that will be my last question for you then. I loved the music in your films. I thought I
Hmm.
actually wrote that
Thanks.
down. How did you choose? Because it really felt appropriate. And I'll tell you honestly, so, I think I shared with you before that I'm very conscious about what I consume. And like I said, if I start watching something and I don't like it, I have no feelings like I need to finish this. No, I'll stop. But
Yeah.
so before I looked when I was looking at Short of the Week, that website, because I go on there somewhat frequently because I like to show my students a short film here and there that's appropriate for them. And I saw the title for yours, The Big Wait, right? There's like about 4 or 5 on there. And I thought, oh, that looks really fascinating. But, I kept scrolling down the page and there was a horror film, and I don't watch horror really. And
Hmm.
I had a total aversion to it, this other film, but I thought, because I have an aversion, I'm going to give it a minute and watch it.
Great.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I did. I gave it a minute, and right away I could feel the energy of the film. I think horror can be done in a really interesting way, but
For sure.
not many people approach it that way. So, and there was this music that was just, it was again, agenda trying to make me feel or think a certain thing, it was not giving me space. And I immediately, after a minute, I was like, okay, this isn't going
Mm.
to work. And then I scrolled back up to the one that I had first thought, which was yours.
Right.
And so I was more actually aware of the music in yours, right? Because I had seen this other one where I was like, ooh, what are they trying to do to me? This feels manipulative. When I came to
Mm.
yours, I could feel that it wasn't, I
Mm.
could feel the difference. And that's where again, talking about discernment, and something I try to teach my students, because I want them to
Mm.
feel when they engage with art, so they know that their feelings can guide them instead of being upset with their feelings. But yours
Yeah.
had this cool this music, and this, I really enjoyed it. My heart felt immediately connected. So how do you choose the music? Do you do your own music, or I mean, like, do you perform? Are you a musician?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Well, I've always played music. Yeah. It's actually one of my first sort of dreams to be a musician. And thank God that that didn't last, because it's very tough
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
anyway, but the yeah, the sensibility to music is definitely just in me. It's one of the most important things for me in film. And I can immediately sense when when I don't, like, just like you described, like it turns me off immediately when when I don't like the music. And I mean, it gets very subjective, but I guess what I really, to get to the point, is more just like you can sense when music is just used as background music,
Hmm.
A, and then B, when it's used to force an emotion.
Yeah.
And so I really love it when sometimes you can sense that, oh, there's no music here because the emotion speaks for itself, or when the music is added to create something very unexpected or something like that, and definitely not with a kind of intention of making you feel something that the script or the performance can't do already. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
it's usually, I'm always very sensitive to it, and I would struggle a lot if I don't know what music to play. I would take a long time to find the right thing. I wouldn't just settle for something like a stock music, or just get someone to do some drones or like score something basic or any of that, especially with documentary. Like for me, the music shouldn't be background music. When it's there, and you listen to it and it's present, and it sort of lives. Um, it has a life of its own as well. It's very intentional. And it's really, really difficult to explain in any way. It's just like it's just a feeling. So whenever I come across something that I feel like it works, it's just not possible to explain why it works. It's just that's
Yeah,
it,
right.
And often you just try a few things and you can tell that it doesn't work, like the kind of doo-wop song at the beginning and throughout the film, that took a long time to find. I tried some before that kind of worked, but you could always feel like, oh, it's not it. And then eventually, after a few years, I kind of stumbled on this one, and it was just like, okay, thank God that exists. There's something that works. Um, so yeah, and other times you can kind of have accidents where you just randomly put something on against an image and you just go, whoa, that's amazing. You know what I mean? Like probably like how Kubrick came across classical music on space images. It's just like what that's just like a fluke sometimes.
Hmm.
Um, so that too is pretty amazing when that happens. But yeah, it's hard to explain. It's something you kind of feel, but for me, it's very important. Like it's
Yeah.
probably the most important thing in outside of casting and writing as well. It's just I would
Hmm.
place music. I would never dismiss it or just go, just find something to support the scene or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's like a collaboration of energies that, mesh
yeah,
somehow together. And sometimes I guess it's contrast that helps, is what you're saying with Kubrick as
yeah.
an example. The contrast. Yeah.
Totally. Oh, contrast is the most fascinating thing in film.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it creates so much, tension, it creates emotion, it creates new ideas, everything. Like it's amazing to work with that. Yeah.
So you are working on some other things right now, and
Yeah.
some of them are these are doc what you have on your website right now are documentaries, although the Caruso of Tin City is a little different than a documentary. You
Mm,
said it's more experimental.
yeah.
And I realized that after I started it, because I thought it was going to be a documentary. And I was like, oh wait, this isn't. But
Great.
definitely
Yeah.
interesting. So people who are interested in what you're doing could maybe get updates by, finding it on
Yeah.
your website, or when you're.
Yeah, I don't know like where I'm a fan of having things be as accessible as possible, so
Yeah.
just putting it on Vimeo, especially short films or anything like so if you followed me on Instagram or on Vimeo, you'll probably always see the next thing that'll come out. But if there is something that is more inaccessible or because of, rights or acquisitions or whatever, I would always put on my website how to watch it or
Mhm.
anything like that. Because
Okay.
if there's one thing I hate is just when a film goes to festivals and then people talk about it and they go, oh, you need to see this film, and then they go on Google and like type it in and there's just nothing. You can't, and then all the momentum is just gone and forgotten, and it's
Yeah.
like, well, and then it takes years before you can even see it, and I'm just like, why is that happening? Just have
Yeah.
it accessible and
Right.
people can see it, and especially for short films.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So will you say out loud what your Instagram is for people, or is it just your name?
Yeah, you can find it as soon as you have my name there. Yeah,
Okay.
Yannick Jamey. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
Yannick Jamey. Yeah, it's not. I don't know. You'll probably have it spelled somewhere in your thing, but
And
it's
what
a
is
strange.
that? Is you're from, I looked, you're from originally from Australia. Is Yannick more of an Australian name? Because I've never
No,
heard it
it's a
before.
French name. Well,
Oh,
yeah, it's a French name. Like it's spelt in the French way. My parents are French, and
okay.
I'm quite multicultural. Like I was born in Australia, but I grew up in France, and then I lived in Canada as well for a while, and then I moved back to Australia. So it's a bit all
Yeah.
over the place.
But
But
not to the US. You haven't lived in the US.
I haven't
More
lived in the
fortunate
US,
for you,
but
maybe.
I've got a family in the US. I've got a brother in San Francisco, and I've got a brother in Montreal, and
Okay.
yeah, I'm quite familiar with it. I went there this year as well for the festivals and stuff.
Oh,
So
right. Yes, I
yeah,
saw. Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I'm more of a North American person, I think, at heart. Like North
Oh, really?
American. Yeah,
Are
I
you?
think so. But also European, you know. So right now I'm living in London for a little bit. And yeah, and then kind of reconnecting with Europe. And I'm glad I'm here right now. Yeah, I'm pretty
Yeah.
glad. But but I think I'll always try and be maybe transatlantic in the like future
Yeah.
most of my life, I think.
Oh, great. Well,
Yeah.
I want you to stay on for another minute, but I'm gonna end our,
Yeah. No
recording.
worries.
And thank you so much for talking today. So this is the Ms. Wonderful Film Club podcast. Anyone listening can find this recording and information on mswonderful.substack.com. And my website is Jana, Jana, MarieRose.com if you want more information about healing and the intersection of healing and energy and film. You can find some of it there. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day. And thank you, Yannick, Jamey.
Thank you. It's awesome.